Leon Black stared at the flickering fluorescent light above his kitchen table, illuminating the eviction notice pinned beside a stack of unpaid bills. 42 years old, a former culinary arts graduate, reduced to this. The restaurant he'd poured his soul into had gone under, a casualty of changing tastes and rising rents. His savings were a joke, his self-respect a distant memory. He'd tried everything: line cook, sous chef, even a dismal stint as a short-order cook in a greasy spoon that smelled perpetually of stale oil and desperation. Nothing had stuck. Nothing had paid enough. His gaze drifted to the crumpled newspaper ad, circled aggressively in red ink. Night attendant needed. The Crossroads Diner. Isolated location. High pay. Immediate start. The words seemed almost too good, a desperate beacon in the encroaching darkness of his life. Crossroads Diner. He vaguely remembered it, a relic from childhood road trips, a faded landmark on a stretch of highway nobody used anymore. An old-school establishment, perpetually open, perpetually ignored. The interview was less an interview and more a transaction. He pulled his beat-up sedan onto the gravel lot of the Crossroads Diner at dusk. The diner was a low, squat building, its neon sign, "Eat Good Grub," half burnt out, casting a sickly pink glow onto the cracked asphalt. Rust crawled up the chrome trim, and the windows, thick with grime, offered no glimpse inside. The air was heavy, still, carrying the faint, unsettling scent of burnt coffee and something else. Something metallic and cold, like ozone. Inside, the diner was a time capsule. Red vinyl booths, a checkered floor, a long counter with swivel stools. Behind the counter sat a man who introduced himself only as Mr. Silas. He was ancient, his skin like dried leather, eyes a startling pale blue that seemed to see right through Leon. He didn't ask for a resume, barely glanced at Leon's tired face. "You need the work?" Silas rasped, his voice like grinding gears. "Desperately," Leon admitted, the word tasting bitter. Silas nodded slowly, his gaze unblinking. "Good. You start tonight. Midnight to dawn. Pays cash, weekly. Don't be late." He slid a laminated card across the counter. It wasn't a menu or a uniform requirement. It was a list. 7 rules, typed in a stark sans serif font. "These are your guidelines," Silas said, his voice dropping, becoming oddly resonant in the silent diner. "You follow them, every single one. No questions, no exceptions. Break one, and well, you won't be back for tomorrow's shift." There was no threat in his tone, only a chilling statement of fact. Leon picked up the card. His fingers tingled, a faint chill spreading through his hand. The rules weren't typical diner policies. They were unsettling. Rules for the Crossroads. Diner, night shift. 1. At 2 a.m., the blinds must be drawn. Ensure the blinds on the large front window are fully closed. Do not look outside as you do this. 2. The midnight special, 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. If a customer orders the midnight special, serve them the pre-prepared covered plate from the back cold locker. Do not speak after they order. Do not make eye contact. Place the plate gently on the counter and retreat to the kitchen until they leave. 3. The jukebox, silence. After 3 a.m. The jukebox will sometimes activate on its own. If it plays anything other than Stardust or Moonlight Serenade, unplug it immediately. Do not listen to the song. Do not attempt to replug it until 5 a.m. 4. The back storage knocking, 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. Ignore any knocking sounds from the back storage room door. Do not, under any circumstances, open that door. 5. The red phone call, 3:33 a.m. exact. The old red rotary phone on the counter will ring. Answer it. Listen for exactly 66 seconds. Do not speak. Hang up. 6th. The basement door. Never enter. The basement door, located near the restrooms, is always to remain locked. If you find it ajar, close and lock it. Do not attempt to go down. 7. The final glance. 5:55 a.m. Before turning on the main neon sign, look directly at the reflection in the diner's front window. If anything appears unusual, immediately proceed to the staff break room and wait until 6 a.m. Leon read the list twice, his brow furrowed. This isn't standard. Silas gave a dry, humorless chuckle. This isn't a standard diner, son. You want the coin? You follow the rules. It's that simple. He stood up, his movements stiff, ancient. Be back at midnight. Keys are under the mat. Leon left the diner in a daze, the scent of stale coffee and ozone clinging to his clothes. The high pay was alluring, a lifeline. But the rules, they were a cold knot of dread in his stomach. What kind of place was this, and what horrors did these rules protect him from, or perhaps demand of him? He had no choice. Pixel, his scrawny tabby cat, was waiting, hungry. The eviction notice loomed. He'd be back at midnight. Midnight arrived, shrouded in a thick, unsettling fog. Leon pulled into the empty lot. The neon sign was off, the diner a dark, imposing silhouette against the gray mist. A single, dim utility light glowed faintly over the back door. He found the keys where Silas had said, under the worn mat, heavy and cold in his hand. Inside, the darkness was absolute, save for the faint emergency lights illuminating the counter. The silence was profound, broken only by the hum of the old refrigerators. Leon found the main light switch, flooding the diner with a harsh, buzzing fluorescent glow. It felt less welcoming, more clinical. The silence persisted, a heavy, watchful presence. He spent the first hour wiping down tables, refilling sugar dispensers, and familiarizing himself with the layout. The kitchen was surprisingly clean, well-stocked. The pantry was cramped, filled with canned goods and dry stores. The restrooms were antiquated, but functional. He found the basement door, a heavy, unpainted wooden slab near the men's room, secured with a rusty deadbolt. He gave it a wide berth. As the hours crept by, the isolation began to press in. No cars passed on the highway, no customers arrived. Just Leon, the diner, and the ticking of an unseen clock. He checked his watch obsessively. 1:30 a.m. A faint, scraping sound came from the far end of the diner, near the cleaning supplies. Leon froze, straining to hear. It sounded like something dragging, or maybe a loose piece of metal. He cautiously moved towards it, his heart hammering. Nothing. The area was spotless. He shook his head. Just the old building settling, or his imagination. 1:55 a.m. Leon glanced at the large front window. The highway was a blur of fog. He remembered Rule 1. At 2 a.m., the blinds must be drawn. Do not look outside as you do this. He felt a prickle of unease. What was out there that he shouldn't see? As the minute hand crept towards 2, he approached the window. He kept his gaze fixed on the blinds, not daring to glance at the swirling gray beyond. His hands fumbled with the cords. Just as his watch ticked 2 a.m., the blinds slammed shut, plunging the front of the diner into a deeper, artificial gloom. A faint thump seemed to come from the other side, as if something had just brushed against the glass. Leon jumped back, his breath catching in his throat. He waited, listening. Silence. He retreated to behind the counter, heart pounding. Okay, Rule 1 successfully executed. But the thump, that wasn't imagination. The night stretched on, punctuated only by the hum of the refrigerators and Leon's own ragged breathing. He focused on cleaning, keeping his hands busy, trying to push the image of the thumping window from his mind. His eyes kept darting to the service bell on the counter, praying for a customer, any customer, to break the oppressive silence. 2:15 a.m. A sudden, soft chime. Leon nearly leaped out of his skin. The service bell. He looked up, expectant. No one. The front door was closed, the lot still empty. He frowned. Must have bumped it, but he hadn't been near the counter. Then he remembered Rule 2. The midnight special, 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. If a customer orders the midnight special, serve them the pre-prepared covered plate from the back cold locker. Do not speak after they order. Do not make eye contact. Place the plate gently on the counter and retreat to the kitchen until they leave. The time frame. 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. Had the bell been a signal? But no one was there. He walked to the cold locker, pulling out a small metallic plate covered with a domed lid. It was cold to the touch and surprisingly heavy. He carried it to the counter, placing it exactly where a customer might sit. He waited. The diner remained empty. The only sound was the distant hum. After 5 minutes, he carefully carried the plate back to the locker. It was untouched. The unease deepened. This wasn't just an old building. There was something else at play here. He moved into the main seating area, starting to wipe down the red vinyl booths. His gaze fell upon the row of mannequins in the small display window facing the highway, usually showcasing faded diner merchandise. He remembered them from the brief glimpse before drawing the blinds. Something was off. Rule from the previous night, though not on the card, but ingrained from his general anxiety. If a mannequin in the clothing section seems to have shifted, do not correct it. Do not make eye contact. Do not acknowledge its presence. He stopped. One of the mannequins, a female figure dressed in a retro waitress uniform, seemed to be turned slightly more towards the diner's interior than he remembered. Her head was tilted, as if observing him. Leon felt a cold sweat break out. He quickly averted his eyes, focusing intensely on the booth he was cleaning. He could feel its presence, a silent, unblinking gaze on his back. He moved methodically, trying to appear nonchalant, forcing himself not to look up. The air around him felt heavy, cold, as if someone had just walked by. He risked a quick glance. The mannequin was still. But for a fleeting moment, he could have sworn her porcelain lips were curved into the slightest, most unsettling smile. He quickly resumed cleaning, his hands trembling. He would not acknowledge it. He would not. The hours crawled. Leon tried to distract himself by restocking the condiment station, organizing menus, anything to avoid thinking about the mannequin. But its silent vigil, the feeling of unblinking eyes watching him, lingered. He constantly felt a chill down his spine, a phantom presence just beyond his peripheral vision. 3 a.m. A new set of rules came to mind. Rule 3. The jukebox silence. After 3 a.m. The jukebox will sometimes activate on its own. If it plays anything other than Stardust or Moonlight Serenade, unplug it immediately. Do not listen to the song. Do not attempt to replug it until 5 a.m. And Rule 4. The back storage knocking, 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. Ignore any knocking sounds from the back storage room door. Do not, under any circumstances, open that door. As if on cue, a faint, rhythmic thumping began from the general direction of the back of the diner. It was muffled, indistinct, but unmistakably a knocking sound. Leon's breath hitched. The back storage room door. He had seen it, a plain steel door near the kitchen, blending in with the wall. He had dismissed the idea of anything sinister earlier, but now the knocking grew slightly louder, more insistent, though still not frantic. It was a patient, steady rhythm. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block it out, but it persisted, a soft thump, 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 thump that seemed to echo in the cavernous silence of the diner. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to investigate, to see what was making that sound. But the rule was clear. Do not, under any circumstances, open that door. He gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles white. Suddenly, without warning, the old jukebox in the corner, dark and silent until now, whirred to life. A scratchy, distorted melody began to play. It wasn't Stardust or Moonlight Serenade. It was a dissonant, off-key tune like a broken music box, accompanied by a low, guttural humming sound that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. Leon's blood ran cold. The rule. He stumbled towards the jukebox, his legs like jelly. The music intensified, the humming growing louder, more oppressive. It was almost like a mournful song, but laced with something ancient and malevolent. He fumbled for the plug, his fingers clumsy with fear. The humming seemed to be coming from within. The jukebox itself, a low, resonating vibration that made his teeth ache. He finally yanked the plug. The music cut off abruptly, the humming fading into a profound, ringing silence. Leon stood there, panting, staring at the inert jukebox. The knocking from the back storage room had also ceased. He checked his watch. 3:07 a.m. He had successfully followed both rules, but the fear was a cold, hard knot in his gut. This was real. Whatever was here, it was responding to the rules. It was aware. The silence that followed the jukebox incident was almost worse than the noise. Leon retreated to behind the counter, clutching a damp dish rag, trying to steady his breathing. He kept glancing at the red rotary phone, knowing what was coming. 3:33 a.m. Exactly. The phone shrieked, a jarring mechanical sound in the stillness. Leon jumped, his heart leaping into his throat. He took a deep, trembling breath, remembering Rule 5. The red phone call, 3:33 a.m. exact. The old red rotary phone on the counter will ring. Answer it. Listen for exactly 66 seconds. Do not speak. Hang up. With a shaking hand, he picked up the receiver. At first, there was only a low, persistent static, like a distant, angry sea. Then, faint whispers began to filter through, barely discernible above the hiss. It sounded like multiple voices, overlapping, indistinct, like a muffled argument. He pressed the receiver tighter to his ear, straining to make sense of them. The static began to recede, and the whispers grew clearer, though still jumbled. He thought he heard fragments of words. Memory. Forgotten. Your fault. Then a single voice, chillingly distinct, cut through the din. It was thin, reedy, yet carried an immense weight of ancient malice. It wasn't speaking to him, but about him. Subject Leon Black. Resistance increasing. Reconditioning incomplete. Leon's breath hitched. Leon Black. His name. How did they know his name? The whisper continued, now a cold, cutting monotone. The debt remains. You cannot escape what was done. The contract binds. A jolt, like a cold electric shock, coursed through him. A forgotten image flashed in his mind, a stark, white room, the metallic tang of something antiseptic, a shadowed figure leaning over him, a low voice saying, "Successful suppression." It was fleeting, gone as quickly as it appeared, leaving him disoriented and nauseous. He heard a faint click. Then the line went dead. The 66 seconds were up. He slowly, carefully, placed the receiver back in its cradle. His hand was shaking uncontrollably. What in God's name was happening? Reconditioning incomplete. The contract binds. What contract? What had he done? And what did any of this have to do with a derelict diner on an empty highway? His gaze fell upon his reflection in the dark, polished surface of the counter. His face was pale, eyes wide with terror. He looked like a stranger. He wiped a hand over his face, trying to erase the fear, but it was etched deep. The diner was no longer just creepy. It was a trap. And he, Leon Black, was caught in its snare. The rest of the shift was a blur of terror and a frantic attempt to rationalize. He scrubbed, he restocked, he moved, anything to avoid standing still, anything to avoid thinking. The phantom scent of ozone seemed to intensify, clinging to the air. Every creak of the old building, every distant hum from the refrigerators, sent a jolt of fear through him. He kept glancing at the basement door, near the restrooms. Rule 6. The basement door. Never enter. The basement door, located near the restrooms, is always to remain locked. If you find it ajar, close and lock it. Do not attempt to go down. The door looked innocuous enough, a plain wooden slab painted a dark, dull gray. But now it felt like a silent, watchful entity itself. He was careful to avoid even walking directly past it, opting for a longer route around the diner's perimeter. He could almost feel a cold draft emanating from beneath it, even though the diner's heating was functional. 4:30 a.m. Leon was wiping down the chrome trim on the old milkshake machine when he heard it. A faint, metallic scraping sound, almost imperceptible. It seemed to come from the direction of the basement door. He froze, his head cocked, listening intently. It stopped. He waited. Nothing. He slowly, cautiously, peered around the corner. The basement door was still closed, still locked. He let out a shaky breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He must be hearing things. Stress. Lack of sleep. He continued working, but his attention was split. A few minutes later, he heard it again. Louder this time. A distinct click, and then a faint, almost imperceptible groan, like old hinges. Leon's blood ran cold. He knew that sound. It was the sound of a heavy door, slowly, quietly, swinging open. He forced himself to look. The basement door. It was no longer fully closed. A sliver of blackness, no wider than a finger, was visible along its edge. The deadbolt was visibly pulled back, its rusty mechanism glinting in the dim light. His heart hammered against his ribs. It was open, not fully ajar, but definitely not locked. The rule. Close and lock it. Do not attempt to go down. He wanted to run out of the diner, to his car, and never look back. But the images of Pixel, of the eviction notice, flashed in his mind. He needed this. He had to follow the rules. With trembling steps, Leon approached the basement door. The cold draft was now undeniable, seeping from the narrow gap, carrying with it that faint, metallic ozone smell. He reached out a hand, his fingers brushing the cold wood. He could feel a faint vibration, a low thrumming coming from the depths below. He pushed the door closed. It resisted slightly, as if something was pressing against it from the other side. He shoved harder, and with a soft, final thunk, the door clicked shut. He fumbled with the deadbolt, shoving it home with a satisfying clack. It was locked. He stared at it, panting. No light, no sound now. Just the heavy, ominous presence of the locked door. He felt a profound sense of relief, mixed with an even deeper fear. What was down there? What had almost gotten out? And how had it opened the lock? The clock hands crawled towards dawn. Leon was a wreck, jumpy and exhausted, but a new kind of resolve was forming within him. He wasn't just a victim here, he was a witness. And whatever this place was, whatever had been done to him, he was going to find out. He kept his distance from the basement door, but his eyes constantly drifted towards it. The earlier events, the thumping, the jukebox, the phone call, the shifting mannequin, The door had cemented one terrifying truth. The rules were not arbitrary. They were instructions for survival. 5:30 a.m. Leon began his closing routine, his movements mechanical. He wiped down the counter one last time, humming a tuneless, nervous melody. The diner was still, save for the hum of the refrigerators. Then he remembered the last rule. Rule 7. The final glance, 5:55 a.m. Before turning on the main neon sign, look directly at the reflection in the diner's front window. If anything appears unusual, immediately proceed to the staff break room and wait until 6 a.m. 5:50 a.m. His heart began to pound anew. This was the final hurdle, the most ambiguous one. If anything appears unusual. What counted as unusual? A face? A distortion? He stood in the center of the diner, facing the large front window still covered by the closed blinds. He waited. His breath held. 5:55 a.m. With a gulp, he reached for the blind cord and slowly, carefully, pulled it up. The blinds rattled, revealing the gray, misty pre-dawn light outside. He fixed his gaze on his own reflection in the vast pane of glass. His own tired, pale face stared back. Nothing unusual. He let out a slow, shaky breath. Relief washed over him, a powerful wave that almost brought him to his knees. He was going to make it. He was going to survive his first week. Then, slowly, imperceptibly at first, the reflection began to change. His own reflection remained, but behind him in the mirrored surface of the window, a subtle shift occurred. The familiar red vinyl booths seemed to subtly ripple. The checkered floor seemed to warp. And then, from the darkest corner of the diner, reflected just over his left shoulder, a faint, translucent distortion began to form. It wasn't a clear figure. It was more like a shimmering ripple in the air, a vague, shifting outline of something impossibly tall and thin, with long, tendril-like extensions that seemed to writhe and reach. It had no discernible features, just a blurred, predatory presence, barely visible in the pre-dawn light, silently observing him. And it was moving, slowly, subtly, towards the reflection of the back storage door. Leon's blood ran ice cold. Unusual. This was beyond unusual. He didn't scream. He didn't move. His mind screamed for him to run, to flee. But the rule. Immediately proceed to the staff break room and wait until 6 a.m. He slowly, carefully, without breaking eye contact with his own terrified reflection and the horrifying distortion behind it, began to back away. He kept his movements smooth, controlled, forcing his trembling legs to obey. The faint shimmer in the reflection seemed to pulse, to almost solidify. He felt a cold dread pressing in on him, a sense of immense, unseen power. He reached the staff break room, fumbling for the door handle. He slipped inside, slamming the door shut, plunging himself into absolute darkness. He leaned against it, panting, his heart trying to hammer its way out of his chest. He stood there, in the oppressive blackness, listening to the agonizingly slow tick of his watch. 5 minutes. 5 minutes of pure terror. Every shadow seemed to writhe. Every creak of the old diner became the sound of something shifting, creeping closer. He could almost feel a cold breath on his neck, hear a faint, scraping sound just beyond the door. He squeezed his eyes shut, wishing for the dawn. 6 a.m. His watch beeped softly. He waited another full minute, just to be sure. He slowly, cautiously, opened the door. The diner was empty, bathed in the growing light of dawn. The air still carried that faint, metallic ozone scent, but the oppressive presence was gone. The window reflection showed nothing but the gray morning. He walked out, legs like jelly, and flipped the switch for the main neon sign. Eat good grub sputtered to life, a garish, reassuring sight. Minutes later, the door jingled and Silas entered. He looked at Leon, taking in his pale face, wide, haunted eyes, and disheveled clothes. He didn't say a word, just nodded slowly. "You made it," Silas rasped, his eyes unreadable. "You want to quit?" Leon opened his mouth to scream, to yell, to declare that he was done with this madness. He wanted to run, to flee, to forget everything he had seen and felt. But then the image of Pixel, waiting for food, the pile of bills, the cold, stark reality of his impending homelessness, flashed in his mind. And something else. That fleeting, disturbing memory of a white room, reconditioning incomplete. The contract binds. It was still there, a splinter in his mind, growing. He needed answers, and for some terrifying, inexplicable reason, he felt a pull to this place, a dark, magnetic draw. "No," Leon heard himself say, the word a raw whisper. "I'll be back tonight." Silas nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his ancient lips. "Thought so? See you at midnight, then." Leon stumbled out of the diner, the harsh morning light doing little to dispel the dread clinging to him. He got into his car, started the engine, and then his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He opened it with trembling fingers. "Good job, Leon. You're remembering. See you soon." He slammed the phone onto the passenger seat, his mind racing. "You're remembering." What did that mean? What was he forgetting? And who was sending these messages? He drove home in a daze, the strange events of the night replaying in his mind. The knocking, the jukebox, the phone call about him, the shifting door, the horrifying reflection. He was no longer just a night attendant. He was part of something ancient, terrifying, and deeply personal. He still had no answers, only more questions, each one heavier than the last. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that his nights at the Crossroads Diner were only just beginning. And whatever secrets it held, they were eager to reveal themselves. Leon spent the day in a haze of paranoid exhaustion. Sleep was elusive, haunted by fleeting glimpses of distorted reflections and disembodied whispers. When he did drift off, fragmented images of stark white rooms and shadowed figures filled his dreams, leaving him gasping awake, soaked in cold sweat. He tried researching the Crossroads Diner. Online searches yielded almost nothing. A few old archived articles about its opening decades ago, a single defunct Yelp review from years past. No current listings, no recent photos, nothing to indicate it was still a functioning 24-hour establishment. It was as if the internet itself had forgotten the place. This amplified his unease. How could a business that operated daily simply not exist in the digital realm? He then shifted his focus to the phrases from the phone call. Reconditioning, memory suppression, the contract binds. These terms led him down a rabbit hole of fringe theories, old medical papers on experimental psychology, and dark web forums discussing mind control and forgotten government projects. Nothing concrete, but enough unsettling parallels to fuel his growing paranoia. The fragmented memory of the White Room returned with more clarity each time, a sharp, cold image of scientific detachment and manipulation. He felt a deep, primal fear. Had he been a subject, a patient? And if so, why couldn't he remember? His phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. The silence holds more than just quiet. Listen closer tonight. No sender ID, no way to trace. Just the ominous, knowing words. It felt less like a threat and more like a macabre invitation. As dusk began to settle, casting long, bruised shadows across his small apartment, the familiar dread began to knot in Leon's stomach. But beneath it, a strange, burning curiosity now flickered. He needed answers. This wasn't just about the eviction notice anymore. It was about his own past, his sanity, and whatever truth lay hidden within the walls of the Crossroads Diner. He had to go back. Leon arrived at the Crossroads Diner well before midnight, a nervous energy thrumming beneath his skin. The old Ford sedan sat in the desolate lot, looking even more forlorn in the creeping gloom. The diner's neon sign, still lit from the day shift, pulsed unevenly, one letter flickering like a dying eye. Silas was already there, behind the counter, hunched over a worn ledger. He didn't look up immediately. The air inside felt colder than last night, somehow thinner, sharper. "You're early," Silas rasped, finally raising his head. His pale blue eyes seemed to pierce Leon, evaluating him. Most don't come back after the first night. Those that do, they often find a reason not to return after the second. "I need the work," Leon said, the lie tasting like ash. He needed answers. Silas nodded slowly. "Aye, there's always a need, and always a price." He pushed a new laminated card across the counter. This one was different. It had 2 new rules, typed below the previous 7, their font slightly bolder, almost aggressive. Addendum to rules, night shift. 8. The freezer door, after 1 a.m. If the large walk-in freezer door is ajar, do not close it. Walk past and ensure you do not look inside. 9. The booth light, always off. The light above the last booth in the far corner must always remain off. If you find it on, turn it off immediately. Do not linger in that booth. "New challenges tonight," Silas muttered, his gaze distant. "The diner. It grows restless." With that, he stood, gathered his things, and without another word, left Leon alone in the chilling silence. Leon stared at the new rules. The freezer door, the last booth. Both innocent enough, but imbued with Silas's ominous tone, they became terrifying new focal points for the night's impending horrors. He felt a shiver trace his spine. He was no longer just stocking shelves. He was navigating a perilous, unseen maze. The first hours of Night 2 were quiet, deceptively so. Leon completed his routine tasks, his senses heightened, every shadow a potential threat. He turned off the front blinds precisely at 2 a.m., this time feeling no thump, but an intense, cold draft that seemed to swirl from inside the diner, pushing against him. He was restocking the dairy aisle when he heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible creak, like heavy hinges straining. His head snapped up. The direction, the kitchen, the walk-in freezer. He checked his watch. 1:45 a.m., too early for the rule. He hesitated, then forced himself to continue his work. But the sound of that creak, the sense of something shifting in the cold storage, burrowed into his mind. At 2:05 a.m., a new intense cold radiated from the kitchen. Leon's breath plumed in the air. He gripped the metal shelf, his knuckles white. Rule 8. The freezer door, after 1 a.m. If the large walk-in freezer door is ajar, do not close it. Walk past and ensure you do not look inside. He crept towards the kitchen, his heart a frantic drum. He peered around the doorframe. The large, heavy stainless steel door of the walk-in freezer was indeed slightly ajar, a narrow sliver of profound darkness visible within. A plume of icy vapor drifted out, carrying with it a faint metallic odor, sharper than the usual ozone. It was like old blood and something else, something cloying and sickly sweet. He could feel an intense cold radiating from the gap, a palpable presence that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. Every instinct screamed at him to close it, to seal away whatever was generating that frigid, foul air, but the rule: do not close it. Walk past and ensure you do not look inside. Leon forced himself to move. He took a deep, shuddering breath and began to walk past the freezer door, keeping his eyes fixed straight ahead on the far wall. The cold intensified as he drew abreast of the opening, pressing in on him like an invisible weight. He felt a phantom touch on his cheek, cold as death. He could hear a faint, almost imperceptible scrape sound from within, as if something was being dragged across the icy floor. He swallowed hard, resisting the overwhelming urge to glance into the darkness. Just a few more steps. He could feel eyes on him, unblinking, ancient. He finally passed, hurrying out of the kitchen, not daring to look back. He leaned against a cashier's stand, gasping for air. The cold seemed to linger on his skin, in his lungs. He had obeyed. But the dread was now a living thing, squirming in his gut. The cold from the freezer lingered, an oppressive weight that made the rest of the diner feel less empty, more filled with an unseen presence. Leon kept busy, polishing tables, wiping down the counter, anything to avoid stillness. He found himself drawn to the far corner booth, the one mentioned in the new rule. Rule 9. The booth light, always off. The light above the last booth in the far corner must always remain off. If you find it on, turn it off immediately. Do not linger in that booth. It was off. A wave of relief washed over him, but as he continued his rounds, he started to notice something. A faint shimmer, a distortion in the air seemed to hover above the booth. It was barely there, like heat rising from asphalt on a summer day, but constant. He stared at it, a prickle of fear running down his spine. It was a distortion, yes, but it also felt like a concentration, a pooling of something there. He was cleaning the glass display case near the entrance when it happened. A soft, almost imperceptible click, followed by a faint hum. He glanced towards the corner booth. The light above it was now on, a single, dull fluorescent tube, buzzing faintly, casting a sickly yellow glow on the empty red vinyl seats. Leon's breath caught in his throat. It had turned itself on. He felt a surge of pure terror. He had to turn it off. He had to obey the rule. With slow, deliberate steps, he moved towards the booth. The light hummed. Its artificial glow seemed to press down on the empty space. As he approached, the air grew colder, and a faint, almost imperceptible whisper seemed to emanate from the booth itself, too faint to form words, but chillingly present. It was not human. He reached up, his hand hovering over the light switch. He felt a sudden, inexplicable resistance, a pressure pushing back against him, as if something invisible was protecting the light. He pushed harder, his fingers fumbling. The humming intensified. The whispers seemed to coil around him. He felt a sudden, sharp pain in his temple, like a needle pricking his brain. He gasped, but shoved the switch down. The light flickered, then died, plunging the booth back into shadow. The hum ceased. The whispers faded. Leon stumbled back, clutching his head, the pain slowly subsiding. He looked at the empty booth, then at the surrounding diner. Silence. No sounds from the freezer. No knocking from storage. Just the normal, oppressive silence of the empty megamart. He had turned it off, but the sensation of something having watched him, having resisted him, lingered. The booth wasn't just a booth. It was a vantage point, and whatever had been there, it was not pleased. The fear from the booth incident left Leon drained, his mind reeling. He needed to rest, but the idea of closing his eyes in this place was terrifying. He sought refuge in the staff break room, gulping down cold coffee from the pot. He pulled out his phone, desperate for a connection to the outside world, but there was no signal. A dead zone, just like every other night. Isolated. Trapped. He sat there, trying to process. The rules were clearly designed to keep him safe, to prevent interaction with unseen forces. But Silas's words, the diner, It grows restless. New challenges tonight, suggested a dynamic, escalating situation. What was causing it? And why was it happening now? Suddenly, the old security monitor on the break room wall, usually displaying static or a single fixed camera angle of the counter, flickered. The image changed. It showed a distorted, grainy view of aisle 7, the one from which he'd heard knocking the previous night, though the rule only applied to the storage room. The picture was fuzzy, warped like an old VHS tape. And then it started to play. It wasn't a live feed. It was a recording. But the figures in it, they were not right. They moved with a jerky, unnatural gait. Their faces were blurred, indistinct, yet Leon felt an overwhelming sense of wrongness. They seemed to be stocking shelves, but their movements were too precise, too synchronized, like automatons. They were the night stalkers before him, perhaps, but they felt alien. Then, one of the figures paused, turned its head, and seemed to look directly into the camera. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle. The image warped further, the colors bleeding. And for a fleeting moment, a single word flashed across the screen, superimposed over the figure in a glowing, ancient script. Remember. The monitor then fizzled, returning to static. Leon stumbled back, knocking his chair over. Remember. The same word from the phone call, the same word that had appeared in the mirror in the old motel story, echoing in his mind now, and the distorted memory of the white room. It was all connected. He wasn't just an attendant. He was part of this. Panic seized him, but was quickly replaced by a cold, burning determination. He had to find answers. He had to understand. He thought about the phone call, reconditioning incomplete. The contract binds. This wasn't random. This was personal. He moved through the diner with a new purpose, no longer just performing his duties, but searching. He went to the small, dusty back office. Silas's office, he presumed. He rummaged through old drawers, ignored stacks of invoices, looking for anything out of place, anything that didn't belong to a normal diner. Beneath a pile of ancient paper menus, he found it. A thick, leather-bound book, its cover faded and unmarked. It looked like a standard maintenance log. With trembling hands, Leon opened it. The first few pages were mundane. Grease trap cleaned, fryer repaired, new bulbs for sign. But as he flipped further, the entries became increasingly bizarre. 1987, October 14th. Anomalous energy fluctuations in aisle 7. Standard containment procedures initiated. Recommend structural reinforcement near cold locker. 1992, February 3rd. Repeated auditory manifestations from back storage. Subject 4, night attendant, exhibited signs of extreme distress. Rule 4 implemented. Containment holding asterisk. 2001, July 28th. Distortion event in front window reflection during shift change. Subject 7, night attendant. Failed Rule 7. Status: unknown. Protocol: red initiated. 2008, April 1st. Jukebox self-activation, anomalous frequency. Subject 11, night attendant. Violated Rule 3. Found unresponsive. Protocol black initiated. 2015, November 11th. Freezer door breach. Subject 15, night attendant. Reported, eyes inside. Breach contained. Reinforce Rule 8 asterisk. Leon's breath hitched. Subject numbers. Protocol red. Protocol black. This wasn't a diner. It was a containment facility. The rules weren't just for his safety. They were part of a system. A system designed to keep something in, or to keep something out. And the subjects, They were the previous night attendants, his predecessors. Unresponsive, unknown status. They hadn't made it. He flipped to the last page. The most recent entry was from just a few weeks ago. 2025. May 20th. Subject 18. Night attendant. Michael Brennan. Ceased communication. Initiating recruitment cycle. Expect increased manifestations. Michael Brennan. That name. It vibrated in his memory. Where had he heard it? The previous story, the original transcript. It was the name of the previous protagonist. A chilling realization dawned on him. Michael Brennan hadn't just disappeared. He was Subject 18. And Leon was Subject 19. He was part of their experiment. The reconditioning, the memory suppression from the phone call. It wasn't a random event. It was part of what they did to the subjects. They erased their memories, implanted them with a new past, and sent them here, to the Crossroads Diner, to serve a purpose. But what purpose? And who were they? Silas? The unknown texter? The revelation of the maintenance log shattered any remaining illusion of normalcy. Leon was not just an employee. He was a pawn in a terrifying, intricate game. The entities, the rules, the disappearances. It was all part of a larger, sinister design. And Michael Brennan, the voice from the original story, was not a fictional character to Leon. He was a predecessor, a casualty, Subject 18. And Leon, Subject 19, was next. He looked at the basement door with new eyes. Rule 6. The basement door. Never enter. The basement door, located near the restrooms, is always to remain locked. If you find it ajar, close and lock it. Do not attempt to go down. The log entries hinted at structural reinforcement near cold locker, containment procedures. What if the basement wasn't just a storage area? What if it was the source? The heart of whatever malevolent force was contained or somehow tethered to this diner. A desperate urge to understand, to uncover the truth consumed him, overpowering his fear. He had to know. He had to break Rule 6. He moved towards the basement door, his heart thumping a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The cold draft was palpable now, emanating from beneath the door, carrying that same metallic ozone scent. He paused, his hand hovering over the deadbolt he had locked just hours ago. He felt a faint thrumming from behind the door, a low, deep vibration that seemed to resonate in his bones. He slowly, deliberately, pulled back the deadbolt. The rusty mechanism groaned in protest. The door creaked open just a few inches, revealing a sliver of inky blackness. A heavy, oppressive silence seemed to emanate from the depths below. A silence that felt older than time itself. He gripped the door frame, peering into the gloom. He couldn't see anything, only a gaping maw of darkness. He reached out, his hands shaking, feeling for a light switch. There was none. Only the cold, damp air rushing up, filled with that unsettling scent. He hesitated. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to retreat, to slam the door shut and lock it forever. But the reconditioning, the contract, Michael Brennan's fate, it all pushed him forward. He stepped inside. The first step into the basement was like plunging into an ice bath. The cold was immediate and intense, far beyond what any normal basement could produce. The air was thick with the metallic ozone smell, mixed with something else, something fetid and ancient, like disturbed earth and rust. The absolute darkness was blinding. Leon fumbled for his phone, activating its flashlight. The beam cut through the black, revealing a narrow, uneven stone staircase descending into the depths. The walls were rough-hewn, slick with dampness, and seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The thrumming grew louder, a low, resonant vibration that seemed to come from the very bedrock beneath the diner. He began his descent, each step echoing eerily in the oppressive silence. The staircase spiraled downwards, seemingly endless. The air grew heavier, pressing in on his chest, making it difficult to breathe. He could hear faint, dripping sounds, and sometimes a soft, dry scuttle, like something moving in the shadows just beyond the beam of his light. He kept his flashlight steady, sweeping it back and forth, trying to dispel the terrifying sense of being watched. The stairs finally ended on a packed dirt floor. The space was vast, far larger than the diner above suggested, stretching into an impossibly wide cavern. The thrumming was deafening now, a deep, resonant pulse that vibrated through the ground, through Leon's very bones. His flashlight beam revealed a grotesque landscape of rough-hewn stone columns, extending into the darkness like the ribs of some colossal, buried beast. And then he saw them. Clinging to the walls, nestled between the columns, were strange, organic growths. They looked like massive, pulsating fungi, glowing with a faint, sickly bioluminescence that pulsed in time with the thrumming. The light they emitted was a deep, unnatural violet, casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed on the cavern walls. In the center of the cavern, illuminated by the violet glow, stood an enormous, intricate machine. It was a complex construct of tarnished brass, rusted iron, and glowing, pulsating crystal conduits. Wires, thick as ropes, snaked from it, disappearing into the walls and floor, connecting it to the entire structure of the diner above. It was the source of the thrumming. This machine wasn't in the basement. It was the basement. And on one side of the machine, strapped into an intricate, wire-laden chair, a chair identical to the one he had seen in his fleeting memories and in the disturbing photograph, was a figure. A man, pale, emaciated, eyes wide and unseeing, his head covered in a complex array of electrodes and wires that fed into the glowing machine. Michael Brennan, Subject 18. Leon gasped, a cold, choked sound. He had found him, the previous attendant, trapped, being reconditioned. He was alive. Or was he? As Leon stared at Michael Brennan, strapped to the machine, a wave of dizziness washed over him. The thrumming intensified, vibrating through his skull. Images, fragmented and terrifying, flooded his mind. He saw a lab, sterile and white, not unlike his dream. Figures in dark cloaks, not lab coats. He saw a younger version of himself, defiant, angry, signing a document. A contract. He heard Silas's voice, not raspy, but clear and commanding. The price for knowledge is memory. The contract binds. He saw himself, willingly, stepping into the very chair where Michael Brennan now sat. It wasn't reconditioning for him. It was a memory wipe, a refabrication. He hadn't been Subject 19 from the start. He was Subject 1 or Subject X, an original participant. He had signed a contract, traded his memories for something, knowledge, power, or perhaps escape from something even worse. The Crossroads Diner. It wasn't just a containment facility, it was a memory factory. A crucible. The entities that the rules kept at bay, the mannequin, the sounds, the reflection, they weren't random. They were fragments of his own suppressed past, or perhaps entities that fed on the memories being extracted or contained. And the rules, they were part of the reconditioning process, designed to trigger specific memories, to test the suppression, to keep the subject functional, yet compliant. He had signed a contract perhaps years ago, a desperate bargain exchanging his memories for what? What knowledge was so terrible? What escape so crucial that he would erase his own past? The thrumming machine began to pulse with a terrifying, rhythmic light. The fungi on the walls glowed brighter, pulsing with an unnatural rhythm. Michael Brennan's eyes fluttered, then opened, wide and vacant, staring directly at Leon, yet seeing nothing. A low, distorted groan escaped his lips, a sound of profound torment. "The contract binds," a voice echoed, not from the phone, but from everywhere, from the very walls of the cavern, resonating with the thrumming. "The payment is due." Leon felt a sudden, agonizing pressure in his head, as if his skull was being squeezed in an invisible vice. The pain was unbearable. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his head, screaming silently. He could feel his own memories, the fragmented ones he had just recalled, being pulled, stretched, torn from his mind. The pain was excruciating, tearing at the fabric of his sanity. He could feel his identity, his experiences, slipping away, replaced by a dull, blank void. This was the reconditioning. This was the ultimate fate of subjects who remembered too much or resisted too strongly. He saw Silas standing in the shadows by the machine, his pale blue eyes now glowing with an unnatural cold light. He wasn't just an old man. He was the overseer, the keeper of the contract. "You remembered, Leon." Silas's voice echoed, cold and distant, devoid of the earlier rasp. "A pity. We had such plans for you." Leon struggled against the invisible force, clawing at his mind, trying to hold on to the fragments of truth he had just discovered. He was a scholar, an archivist, desperate for forbidden knowledge. He had sought out something ancient, something that Silas had offered in exchange for a price. His memories, his identity, a lifetime of service. The Crossroads Diner was the payment, the gilded cage where he would endlessly serve, his mind a blank slate, until the entities he had unleashed consumed him. But now he remembered. He chose to remember. A sudden, desperate thought flashed through his mind, a fleeting image of the red rotary phone. The 66 seconds. The phone call was not just a test. It was a communication channel. A way to send out a signal, to disrupt the reconditioning, to fight back. With a superhuman effort, fighting against the crushing pressure in his head, Leon forced himself to stand. He needed to get back to the phone. He needed to break the cycle. He needed to expose them. He stumbled backwards, away from Michael Brennan, away from the pulsing machine, away from Silas. The ancient entities in the walls seemed to writhe, their violet glow intensifying, the thrumming growing into a deafening roar. Shadows detached themselves from the columns, coiling and reaching for him. He ran. Up the spiraling stone stairs, the cold biting at his heels, the ancient reek filling his lungs. He could hear a low, guttural growl erupting from the cavern below, and the sounds of heavy, unseen bodies moving rapidly. He burst through the basement door, slamming it shut behind him. The deadbolt, still partially pulled back, clicked into place with a resounding clang as he shoved it home. He leaned against the door, panting, the cold radiating through the wood, the faint thrumming still vibrating in his bones. He knew it wouldn't hold forever. Leon stumbled towards the diner counter, his vision blurring, the pain in his head agonizing. He could feel his mind tearing, the newly reformed memories battling against the lingering reconditioning. He had to reach the red phone. The diner was dark, the emergency lights casting long, distorted shadows. The fluorescent buzz was gone. The only sound was his ragged breathing and the frantic pounding of his heart. He looked at his watch. 5 a.m. Too early for the scheduled call, but he knew instinctively that the rules had been broken. The game had changed. He reached the counter, his hand shaking uncontrollably as he grabbed the red receiver. He could feel a surge of cold energy, a profound wrongness emanating from the phone itself. He pressed it to his ear. Static. Then the same overlapping whispers as before, but louder, more frantic. Breach. Subject 19 resisting. Initiate final protocol. He took a deep breath, fighting against the urge to scream. He had to send a signal. He had to. He didn't know what to say or who would be listening, but he had to try. He had to transmit the truth before he was consumed. He opened his mouth. A low, distorted groan escaped, not his own voice, but a corrupted, echoing sound like a broken phonograph. The entities within him, the lingering reconditioning, were fighting back, trying to prevent him from speaking. He pushed harder, focusing on the fragmented memories, on Michael Brennan's unseeing eyes. He forced the words out, a painful, raspy whisper. Crossroads Diner. Basement. Experiment. Dot. The static intensified, then a shriek of feedback. The phone line went dead. Leon dropped the receiver, his body convulsing. He collapsed onto the floor, every nerve ending screaming, his mind a battlefield. He lay there, trembling, the cold seeping into his bones, waiting for the end. What felt like an eternity was only a few minutes. The pain in his head slowly began to recede, leaving behind a dull ache and a profound emptiness. He lay on the cold linoleum, staring at the ceiling, feeling different. The memories of the basement, of Silas, of the contract were still there, but they felt distant, like a dream. The sharp edges were blurred, the terror muted. He tried to sit up, his limbs heavy, unresponsive. He felt detached, observing himself from afar. He was tired. So tired. He heard the faint jingle of the door. Silas. The old man entered, his pale blue eyes scanning the diner. He stopped when he saw Leon on the floor. He didn't look surprised, just observant. "You broke the rules, Leon," Silas rasped, his voice back to its usual dry, grinding tone. There was no malice, no anger, just a simple statement of fact. "You went down. You spoke." Leon tried to respond, but only a faint gurgle escaped his lips. He wanted to scream, to accuse, to fight, but the energy isn't there. The will isn't there. Silas walked over, his ancient face impassive. He knelt beside Leon, his eyes unblinking. The contract binds, Leon. Always. The price for knowledge is memory. And now, you've paid in full. He reached out a hand, incredibly cold, and gently touched Leon's forehead. A final, piercing jolt of white-hot pain seared through Leon's mind. The remaining memories, the truths he had so desperately clung to, were ripped away, leaving only a serene, empty calm. He felt himself floating, light and untroubled. The diner felt safe again. The rules were simply rules to be followed. No fear, no questions, only duty. Silas stood up, adjusted his coat. "The shift is almost over, Leon." Time to prepare for the day manager. Leon slowly, unsteadily, got to his feet. He looked at Silas, a faint, polite smile on his face. "Yes, Mr. Silas." Right away. He felt a profound sense of peace. The vague anxiety that had plagued him for months was gone. He was Leon Black, a night attendant at the Crossroads Diner. He had a job, and he had rules to follow. Simple, efficient, safe. He walked to the front window. 5:55 a.m. He looked directly at his reflection. His face was calm, serene. No distortions, no lurking horrors, just him. He activated the main neon sign. "Eat good grub" flickered to life. 6 a.m. The door jingled, and the cheerful, oblivious day manager walked in, whistling a jaunty tune. "Morning, Leon. Everything quiet?" "Quiet as a tomb, sir," Leon replied, a faint, pleasant smile on his face. Just like always. He picked up his phone. A new message, from an unknown number. He opened it. "Good work, Subject 19. Protocol Delta confirmed." New memory baseline established. "See you tonight." Leon deleted the message. He didn't know why he got these odd texts, Probably a wrong number. He walked out into the crisp morning air, got into his beat-up sedan, and drove home. He couldn't remember why he was so worried about bills or about Pixel. But a faint, pleasant purr greeted him at the door. He fed his cat, then drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep, ready for his next shift, ready to follow the rules. The Crossroads Diner. It had always been there, and it always would be.